have a special guest on the line joining us, Kendall Rogers, editor and writer of D1 Baseball. And Kendall, first and foremost, how excited are you to get baseball season underway?
Oh, I'm extremely excited. It seems like Omaha was just yesterday. Obviously, Arkansas fans like to forget the way the season ended, but I'll tell you what, it was a magical campaign for the Hogs. There's not many teams out there who can say they played for a national championship, but you know what? It's a new year. And it's certainly a new vision there at Baum Stadium. Some holes to fill, but a lot of familiar faces, to say the least.
The D1 Baseball preseason poll coming out on Monday. Arkansas ranked 16th. Why 16th for the Razorbacks?
Well, I think the biggest thing when you look at Arkansas is there's certainly the ability to get much, much higher. There's zero doubt about that. But I also think when you look at this team overall, there are some question marks. You look in the Friday role of Isaiah Campbell. He's certainly a guy that, as we saw last year, can look great, and as we saw in Omaha, can look great in the next outing, not be so great. And so I think if you're Isaiah Campbell, he needs to be more consistent. The stuff is electric. And then you look at the rest of the week in rotation, there's some question marks there. Kevin Kopp's the guy that Coach Van Horn's very excited about. Patrick Wicklander, a young arm, up to 90, 91, 92 this fastball. They're really excited about him. Right now those two are slated to be in the week in rotation. Those two guys certainly have something to prove. So that's some uncertainty. Cole Ram is certainly a guy that I think has a chance to be in the week in rotation after being a weekend guy last year. So the starting rotation, a little bit of a question mark. There are some question marks offensively, though I'll be honest with you. When I look at Casey Martin, Heston Kjerstad, and Dom Fletcher, I feel pretty good about that lineup. But there is some uncertainty with some of these new guys. And then the strength for me when I look at Arkansas is that back end with that bullpen. They will have one of the better bullpens in college baseball. Matt Cronin, Cody Scroggins had electric stuff in Omaha last year. And certainly Jacob Kostychuk is my pick to click for this team.
Well, I want to start there with the pitching staff with you. First and foremost, Wes Johnson gone to the Twins. They bring in Matt Hobbs from Wake Forest. Your opinion on that hire?
I think that was a terrific hire. If you talk to coaches around the country, premier programs, Matt Hobbs is on the short list of most of those guys. Just look at the job that Matt did at Wake Forest. He's a terrific developer of arms. Wake Forest is not one of those places where you're going to get the premier recruits every year, and he was able to turn a lot of those guys into studs, the most recent being Griffin Roberts, who's a high-round pick, was a reliever to start his career, ended up being one of the best starters in college baseball and ended up being a high-round pick. So Matt certainly has a very, very good pedigree, and, of course, when you lose a guy like Wes Johnson, you've got to make a good hire, and I think Dave Van Horn did do that with Matt.
Isaiah Campbell, a guy that you talked about, and you talked about, he could be hot and he could be cold. It kind of depends, but they really need him to be a solid Friday starter during the weekends, especially once SEC starts. What's it going to take for you to put Isaiah Campbell's name with the rest of those SEC Friday night starters?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just be consistent. You look back at Omaha last year, and, he could not have looked better in that first start. In the second one, he just looked a little rusty. And, that happened last year. If you remember back to that Kentucky series, he had a good start against the Wildcats, but, DVH at that point was considering putting him on the bench because he was so wishy-washy. So just being more consistent. The one thing I do like about Isaiah this year is the fact that his teammates selected him a team captain. That says a lot about what they think about him. And that also says a lot about what's expected of him from a leadership standpoint.
It's funny, as we talk about the pitching staff and being unproven, one of the biggest storylines heading into the season is about Connor Noland. He threw bullpen on Monday. This is also a kid who was starting quarterback for Arkansas some games this season. As a dual threat or dual athlete with Connor Noland, what are you looking at to get out of him during baseball season?
Well, it'll be interesting because, the question kind of becomes, where does he kind of factor in the equation when you look at this team, both offensively and on the mound? They may have some uncertainty, but I'll tell you what, there's some talented arms here. So I think the biggest thing is just kind of finding your role, especially when you have a team with this much depth across the board.
And let's really quickly talk about now moving to the defensive side of the ball. You have Heston Kjerstad, you have Dominic Fletcher back in the outfield. It looks like Casey Martin's probably going to second base, shuffling a few pieces there, but the biggest defensive piece that this team needs to find before really the season begins.
Yeah, I think when you look at this team overall, I'm really intrigued to kind of see this move from Casey Martin over to shortstop. He obviously, just a sensational third baseman last year. Be interested to see if he makes that smooth transition. I think he will. I think he's, to me, he's a top player in the 2020 draft class, and I think he'll prove that. even at shortstop. You look at Jack Kinley over at third base. I know he's a guy that they're really excited about his defensive skills. Certainly a little bit to be desired offensively, but Kinley certainly a premier defender over there at third. And I'm also kind of interested to get a look at the Trevor Ethel, the transfer from SEMO. He was a guy that just had a terrific career for the Red Hawks up there, and so I'm interested to see how he does in the SEC. And of course, you look in the outfield, there are a lot of good races out there. In the outfield, specifically in left, and Matt Goodhart and Christian Franklin. Who gets that starting spot on opening day? And of course, you feel pretty good about the rest of that outfield with certainly Dom Fletcher, one of the premier outfielders in college baseball, leading the way. So I guess to wrap this up, I really like Arkansas's outfield. I think the infield will be fine. I like the potential of the offense. I think it all boils down to that weak rotation. Can Isaiah Campbell be the dude that he can be?
Sure.
And, what happens those number 2 and number 3 spots?
Absolutely. Let's talk quickly about the offense because they had a lot of power. They've still got some, but Dave Van Horn really talked about this team and their speed during the fall. Yeah,
there's no doubt about it. Matt Goodhart is going to be one of those guys that's going to be counted on that department. He's, got bat speed. He's a good runner. He's certainly Casey Martin's a guy that can run. And, you look at Jack Kinley, he's a guy with above average speed as well. And so, I think when you look at Arkansas overall, we talk so much about the Martins and the Fletchers and the Kirstads, but I think this is a team too, especially when you mention Goodhart and Kinley and guys like that. Those guys may not be a seasoned offensively. So what do you have to do if that happens? You have to create things a little bit. And so I think this can make this offense pretty dangerous because you have those power guys there in the middle, but then you have the ability to kind of use other guys' athleticism to your advantage in other areas.
Well, we talked about the uncertainty. There is definitely that, but the expectation remains the same, and it's get back to Omaha. So for this 2019 season, not getting back to Omaha, a fail for this baseball team?
I don't think so, especially when you look at the SEC. I mean, we had 8 SEC teams ranked. We could have very easily had a 9th in Texas A&M. They were our first team out of the top 25. So you're talking about 9 teams that are top 26 teams in college baseball. And if you look back at last year, Kentucky's one of the best teams in college baseball, and they didn't even make the postseason because they finished the year, 4 games under 500 in the league. So I think the margin for error in the SEC is so razor thin. It's difficult to sit there and say that not getting to Omaha is a failure. But I'll say that. I like this team offensively. If the weekend rotation can kind of come together, because I feel so good about the bullpen, if the weekend rotation can come together, I have no doubt this team can make a run and put itself in a position to get back to Omaha and potentially do something better. If you remember back, Vanderbilt lost its first national championship series and then came back the following year when we didn't expect it and won a national championship. Arkansas could be one of those teams as well.
Maybe history repeats itself. I can tell you this, Hog fans very excited for baseball season to get underway here in February. Kendall Rogers, always appreciate your time, man. We'll hopefully catch up with you when you hit Fayetteville soon.
Anytime, guys. See you soon.